Hello, good evening, good afternoon, good morning, whatever time of the day it is you're joining us for another episode of Fairly Random Entertaining Dialogue, or what we call Fred. It's the Tulsa World Scene podcast. I'm joined here by my colleagues Jimmie, Tramel, and Grace Wood. And it's spring and it's lovely, and it's a time of regeneration and coming back. And one of the things that in popular culture that always seems to be coming back is vampires. There's coming up, I think it's going to be released end of this week, a new
Friday
vampire
the
movie.
14th. Yes.
Friday the 14th. Well, doesn't that send a chill down your spine? It's a new film called Renfield, and Jimmie's discovered a Tulsa connection to that.
We do actually, I'm sorry, it's a Broken Arrow connection. I should have clarified, but it's a metro connection.
Tulsa area connection.
Area connection. But we do have someone locally who worked on the movie. Renfield stars Nicolas Cage as Dracula. Of course, Nicolas Cage is the nephew of Francis Ford Coppola, who filmed The Outsiders and Rumblefish here in 1982. And Renfield, if I were to ask Grace and James, who is Renfield? Would you know who Renfield is?
I don't think so. It's not ringing any bells for me. What about you, James?
It rings a very large bell with me. So he was sort of Dracula's henchman. I believe it was Dwight Fry who played him in the Bela Lugosi version in 1931, and he's an inmate in the novel. He's an inmate at an insane asylum run by one of the characters that has somehow gotten under the spell of Count Dracula, and likes to catch flies and eat them because they're just little lives with the blood in them. So,
which would be great if you have a mosquito problem. You just send Renfield in the backyard and you're good to go. But the film was about Renfield, who is the longtime servant of Dracula, wanting to break free and have a life of his own. So it's a horror comedy, but it's the first time Dracula's quote unquote wingman or bat wingman has got a movie of his own, as opposed to being the sidekick. You guys have a favorite depiction of vampires in popular culture, or maybe a favorite Dracula actor over the years?
Well, I mean, it's so so many people when they think of the name Dracula, they see Bela Lugosi, who, if memory serves me right, wanted to, and was buried wearing his Dracula cape. I also believe that if I remember correctly, he played the role originally on Broadway. It was originally a play, and he had to learn his lines phonetically because he originally spoke no English. I may be misremembering that, but that does lend itself to that otherworldly, kind of stilted delivery that he gives. But
I tell you what, Grace and James, give me 2 or 3 vampire projects in pop culture that you love.
Grace, you go first.
I think the first one that really comes to mind for me is Twilight. I feel like for my generation, it came out when me and all my friends were like 12 and 13, and we just instantly became like so obsessed with it. And now looking back, I can kind of recognize like how silly and campy and ridiculous it is, and I can still love it for what it is. And me and my friends still rewatch it pretty much every year. So I think the Twilight Saga is a big one for me. Also, the Vampire Diaries. I don't know if you guys have heard of that TV show. That really had a grip on my generation as well. Even like Castlevania, the video game, and they just turned it into a Netflix series like a couple couple years ago. It's about vampires. So yeah, those are some of my main ones, I guess.
Oh boy, I mean I've seen a whole lot of depictions of Dracula stories. Um, uh, there are elements of the Francis Ford Coppola version of Dracula that I like. I've seen Jack Palance play Dracula in a fairly effective one. Of course, The Night Stalker is all about a vampire, and I'm sure that you can share some information about that. more than information than I could about that, Jimmie. But okay, my favorite vampire related film, and now the title of it has gone out of my head, but it starred Willem Dafoe, and it was based on the making of the movie Nosferatu. Shadow of the Demon, something like that. And Willem Dafoe played Max Schreck, who was hired to portray the vampire in this very loose adaptation of Dracula. And the conceit of this particular movie is that this personage, this Max Schreck, was actually a vampire, and that it was the silent version of Nosferatu remains a wonderfully creepy film. It was remade in the late 70s with Klaus Kinski in the title role, and that's a disturbing little tale. But yeah, it's such a fascination how this archetype is everywhere in popular culture. You know, you mentioned that this is a vampire comedy, and one of Nicolas Cage's early roles that kind of set him off as something of an eccentric was his role in Vampire's Kiss, where he imagines himself that he is a vampire. I think that's the movie where he eats a cockroach. But have either of the two of you given any thought to why the vampire, which has really not been around, well, there have been variations of it, but the idea of the bite in the neck, suck I want to suck your blood kind of vampire, why that is so popular as a figure in our culture today.
Grace, you got any theories on that? Because it seems like there's something almost romantic about it, that people want to get bitten on the neck by a vampire. Although personally I don't, but there seems to be that thing.
Yeah, I feel like because lore about vampires and creatures like them go back into ancient times, right? And I feel like back then maybe they were sort of feared and grotesque and sort of scary. And now, like in our popular culture, like we have very attractive actors playing vampires, and it's kind of romanticized, and just we have like this fascination with them. So I feel like maybe we've humanized them a little bit, and that's why the attraction has such staying power. So I don't know, that's one theory.
Well, that the idea of it being a romantic thing, I think really took form in the late 70s when they made the Frank Langella version of Dracula. Because I mean, he looked like, Heathcliff walking off the moors. I mean, he looked like a romantic hero who just happened to get a little, bitey every so often. But yeah, but you look at the old Christopher Lee ones. Christopher Lee is was never played him as, a romantic figure. He was always, he knew very well he was playing a monster. So I don't know. It's something about which people will furiously think, I know, but that's something to check out.
I introduced my son to the Lost Boys this year, which was made far before he was ever born, but it was showing at a local theater. I took him to see the Lost Boys, and he loved it. So you just never know what it is about the vampires that's going to hook people throughout the years. It's not my movie, but I love the character Blade, who got a Marvel movie before any of these other superheroes did, except for Howard the Duck. But Blade, the 1970s comic book series, Tomb of Dracula, in the 10th issue, there was Blade, and the origin was his mother was bitten by a vampire when he was pregnant. So when Blade was born, he had the abilities of a vampire, but could walk during the day and not be burned up by the sun, kind of a hybrid character, and then dedicated his life to going and becoming a killer of vampires. So I thought that was a new, kind of fresh spin on the whole vampire thing.
And one of our former colleagues, John Woolley, wrote a novel called Awash in the Blood, which is about a televangelist who becomes a vampire. And his rationale for what he's doing is he's giving people eternal life by snacking on the nape of their neck. So there's all kinds of fascinating ways of dealing with that. But let's try to move on to something a little more lighter. What else have you got coming up for this weekend, Grace?
Well, first of all, I want to read that book. I can't believe I didn't think about it. I'm adding that to my Goodreads right after this.
Okay.
But yeah, later this week, I have a story about the latest release from the Tulsa musician Nathan Wright. It's a song called Away With Me, and it's the longest one he's made. It's about 7 minutes long, and it's really, really good. So I have an interview with him where he just kind of breaks down like how the song was made and the inspiration behind it, as well as a look at the animated music video that goes along with it. So that'll come out later this week, I think, probably on Friday.
Right. Well, I've got coming up an interview with Sharon Isbin, a classical guitarist, who will be appearing in Owasso on Saturday with 3 members of a legendary family of Indian musicians that are all masters of an instrument called the sarod, and it's a blending of classical and Indian classical music. That's going to be really, really interesting. It's called Strings for Peace. The idea came from Amjad Ali Khan, who's the patriarch of this group, who said that there are only 7 notes in music, the A through G, but those 7 notes connect people in ways that nothing else can, not language, not images. So that's coming up this Friday, and we'll also be talking with the owners of a company here in town that does highly specialized audio production and composing for film and television. They've worked on Reservation Dogs, they've worked on Killers of the Flower Moon, and they are the composers for a new film that's just been released called The Journey, that features the Italian tenor Andrea Bocelli traveling along a famous route through Italy and pausing to visit sites and sing. And they composed the music for that. So have an interview for them coming up on Sunday. What else have you got coming up, Jimmie?
There's an upcoming PBS documentary series that explores symbols of America. They pick 8 symbols over the course of the series 8-episode run and explore that symbol. One of those symbols is the American cowboy. And the host of this documentary series obviously grew up wanting to be, watching cowboy movies, cowboy TV shows, was fascinated by cowboys. So one of the places he comes to explore the real cowboy, what is the real cowboy, is Oklahoma. So we'll write about that in Friday's Tulsa World.
Okay. Do they figure out what makes a real cowboy?
Well, the problem is you don't know their name, because the entertainment cowboys, you know the Lone Ranger's name and John Wayne's name and Roy Rogers' name, but the real cowboys were just, workers who helped feed the country, basically.
Real cowboys have real cows. All right. Well, on that note, we will bring this episode of Fred to a close. We want to thank you all for putting up with us one more week, and we will gladly see you later.
Behave.
Bye.